Howdy out there, folks. It's your skipper here to present our macro minute for Thursday, June 2nd, 2022. Starting with asset markets, we have stocks up this morning, commodities mixed with crude oil lagging, crypto up, dollar down, global bond yields up. Market moving headlines, biggest headline of the day. You have scant signs of more energy supply on the horizon. So you have OPEC Plus mulling a bigger oil supply boost today. Delegates are discussing the increase of 600,000 barrels a day for July and August rather than the scheduled 432,000. Earlier, the Financial Times reported that Saudi Arabia may be ready to crank up its taps, i.e., to step in case Russian output drops substantially out of the market due to sanctions. It wasn't confirmed, but certainly that rumor certainly had a big impact on oil this morning. It's since recovered into this OPEC Plus meeting. Shifting gears, is the Fed already getting the softest landing it wants? Companies had fewer jobs than expected in May from an ADP payrolls perspective, private payrolls. That number was 128,000, well shy of the 300,000 estimate. This is the lowest monthly sum since the onset of the pandemic recovery. Maybe it'll lead to, maybe it's presaging a miss in the non-farm payrolls data point we're going to get tomorrow. I don't think that the actual payrolls data is what really matters. It's the wage data. It's the overall aggregate income data as a function of payrolls, hours worked, et cetera. The Fed needs to take some air out of that balloon, and they're very likely to continue draining liquidity from a medium-term perspective. Big movers this morning. Nice day this morning in Ethereum, plus 2% to only down 36% month over month. You definitely didn't suffer that from any signals that we've sent. Very much got you out of Bitcoin, Ethereum, crypto broadly at the opportune time several months ago, and then going all the way back to December when we really got you out. Had a nice little trade there between March and early April, but we didn't feel like we wanted to stick into that. And obviously, booking those gains back in early April was a very good call. Shifting gears to our and lastly, Bloomberg Agriculture Index up 1% to only down 2% month over month. Both energy and food prices continue to trend higher, definitely not relenting from an inflation signaling perspective. So that's something to keep in mind as it relates to this dynamic between goods inflation and services inflation, potentially with services inflation wrestling the baton and keeping inflation statistics broadly higher than the Fed would prefer from a comfortability standpoint. Shifting gears to our volatility, adjusted momentum signals and probable ranges. U.S. dollar bullish fam still at the lower boundary of its probable range here. With a 2% upside. Gold bearish fam still towards the upper boundary of its probable range with 3.7% downside. 10-year nominal treasury yield bullish fams kind of in the middle of its probable range, exactly in the middle with 17 basis points of upside and 17 basis points of downside. High yield OAS bullish fam still at the lower boundary of its probable range with 75 basis points of upside. Got S&P 500 bearish fams minus at the upper boundary of its probable range with 8.6% of downside. VIX neutral VAMs, towards the middle of its probable range with 12% of downside versus 29% of upside. NASDAQ 100 bearish FAMs at the upper bound of its probable range with 11.5% of downside. Russell 2000 bearish FAMs at the upper bound of its probable range with 10% of downside. Bitcoin bearish FAMs still not quite at the upper bound of its probable range, got 2% upside, 3% upside with 12% downside. Ethereum bearish FAMs. Kind of in the middle of its probable range with minus 12% downside versus 10% upside. Shanghai Composite neutral VAM still continues to hug the upper bound of its probable range. This looks like a chart that wants to break out the bullish VAMs. We'll check in a couple weeks on that. WTI crude oil bullish VAMs at the middle of its probable range here, even inclusive of today's correction, minus 4% of downside versus 10% of upside. And then lastly, agricultural neutral VAMs towards the lower bound of its probable range, only 1% downside with 6.6% of upside. Industrial metals bearish VAMs. Minus 6 at the upper bound of its probable range with 6.3% of downside. So that Darius Dale presenting our macro minute for Thursday, June 2nd, 2022. Best of luck out there today.